The Montana wilderness is quiet, untouched and indifferent. Thick pine trees tower over the landscape, their black silhouettes cutting into the gray dawn sky. A distant wolf's howl echoes across the ridgeline, carried by the wind. A small campfire flickers weakly in a clearing, its embers barely alive. Eleanor Whitmore sits close to it, rubbing her frozen fingers together. The wind cuts through her dress like a knife. Her face is pale from the cold, exhaustion pressing heavy on her bones. A rabbit carcass roasts on a spit over the fire. Across from her, Nokoma crouches, checking the sharpness of a skinning knife against her thumb. Eleanor watches her cautiously, unsure whether to be grateful or wary of the woman who saved her.
I don't understand why you helped me.
Nokoma doesn't look up.
You were going to die. Didn't need much reason beyond that.
She tears a piece of meat from the rabbit and tosses it to Eleanor. It lands just in front of her boots. Eleanor stares at it. She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning. Her pride tells her to refuse. Her starving stomach makes the decision for her. She picks up the meat and takes a hesitant bite. Nokoma watches unimpressed.
I do not know what your plans are, but you will need more than a gun and a stiff spine to survive out here.
Eleanor swallows hard.
Well, I didn't ask for survival. I had a home. Until men like the ones who took my husband burned it to the ground.
Nokoma's eyes flicker slightly, but she says nothing. Instead, she reaches into her satchel and pulls out a small wooden pendant. She tosses it onto Eleanor's lap.
What is this?
A token of your husband's honesty, or his deceit.
Eleanor studies the engraved markings on the pendant. Blackfoot carvings, the same insignia she saw scribbled in the corner of James's map. She squints.
Where did you get this? And how do you know my husband?
Nokoma leans forward.
My son carried one just like it.
A long silence stretches between them. The fire crackles, the wind sighing through the trees. Finally, Eleanor exhales, pressing her fingers against her forehead.
You knew James. I want to know how. And now that I think about it, this explains how you were so ready to save me. What's going on here?
The truth is, I knew your husband through my son. Tahonis guided him through the lands your people stole from mine, kept him alive in storms, led him to hidden passes and safe waters. He called James a friend. Then, one day, my son went missing, and your husband came home rich.
Eleanor grips the pendant tightly, nausea twisting in her gut.
You think James had something to do with his disappearance?
Nokoma doesn't answer immediately. She just looks at Eleanor with cold, calculating certainty.
It is possible that you and I are both chasing ghosts.
The fire pops, sending a spray of sparks into the air. The morning sun peeks over the ridgeline as Eleanor and Nokoma move through the forest. Eleanor is shivering, sore, and barely keeping up. The terrain is rough, rocks shifting beneath their boots as they climb higher. Nokoma moves like a shadow, silent, confident, unaffected by the biting cold.
Where exactly are we going?
Your husband's map leads north. If I know James, and I believe I do, he buried what he was running from in the mountains.
Eleanor exhales sharply.
I just can't get my head around on how you know James so well. And he's neither mentioned you nor Tahonis.
Nokoma doesn't answer immediately. Finally, she glances at Eleanor with a blank expression.
Because my son trusted him. He has visited our lands and brought us many gifts, in exchange for our help.
Eleanor clenches her fists, but before she can respond, a rustling sound makes them both freeze. The bushes ahead shake. Nokoma draws her bow instantly. Eleanor clutches her rifle, heart beating out of her ears. The branches part. A man stumbles out. He's young, no older than 20, his face covered in dried blood and bruises. His coat is torn and he looks barely able to stand. Eleanor gasps.
Oh, dear God.
The young man collapses into the snow. Nokoma lowers her bow slightly but doesn't put it away.
Check him.
Eleanor hesitates.
He might be one of them.
Nokoma eyes the man's wounds.
or he might know where they are.
A heavy silence. Eleanor finally kneels beside him, pressing a cautious hand to his forehead.
He's burning up. We need to get him warm.
Nokoma exhales through her nose, nodding once. She grabs the young man by the arm and slings him over her shoulder effortlessly. Eleanor stares in shock.
How the hell?
Move, widow.
The young man lies by the fire, breathing shallowly. Eleanor has wrapped him in one of Nokoma's furs, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. Nokoma sits against a tree, eyes closed, sharpening her hunting knife.
Who do you think he is?
My guess is someone who was running from the same men you were.
Eleanor looks down at him. The bruises, the healing cuts along his jaw. Finally, his eyes flicker open. He sees Eleanor first, blinks. Then, his gaze snaps to Nokoma. His entire body tenses.
No, you can't let them find me. You don't understand.
Eleanor leans forward.
Who's after you?
The young man shakes his head violently.
They'll come. They always come. They like to hunt in the dark.
Eleanor and Nokoma exchange a tense look.
Who? Tell us who.
The young man's voice drops to a whisper.
The men who killed James Whitmore. They're known as the Goats of Hell Gang. They are a merciless brood. When they find you, and they will, you won't have no trouble meeting your maker. I only got away because they were distracted by another.
Eleanor's blood runs cold. The fire crackles in the silence. Nokoma lowers her knife. She finally speaks, voice steady, quiet.
Okay, Mukti. Start talking. Leave nothing out.